Yes, thank you very much. I think, first of all, we have really improved our international cooperation between the services, between the law enforcement agencies. But I think more important, or as important, is that we have now a better insight in our societies. You know, we have learned our lessons in Germany. We have the Hamburg cell on behalf of 9/11. And we have now really a better insight, we have a better understanding about the communities, the radicalized communities in Germany. And we have been successful since 2000. We have suffered 7 attempts carrying out terrorist attacks in Germany. In 6 cases, we have been successful. In 1 case, we have not been successful, but the other side has been not successful as well. Therefore, we are threatened. And we are condemned to a very close cooperation inside Europe because we have open borders. We see that these organizations are closely linked between each other inside Europe, but not only inside Europe, but only with Asia, with Turkey, and especially with Pakistan. Pakistan, Afghanistan is a big problem for us because we don't know the exact figures, but our estimate is that there are more than 150 people from Germany, young male Muslims, have been there, are there, and we have made the experience that they have been trained there, and sometimes they get the order to carry out terrorist attacks, not only in Pakistan, Afghanistan, but in Europe, in Germany as well. That's our great problem. And that leads us to the other problem. I think we have a quite good cooperation with our Western partners in Europe, I've already mentioned, but okay, with the United States as well. We have sometimes problems with the countries of origin, let me say, with Pakistan, with some states in the northern part of Africa. On the one side, they are less capable, but on the other side, they are not obeying always our, let me say, human rights issues. That raises questions for us. In practice, political problems, and therefore that's a real problem for us because our clients, let me call them clients, they have still roots to their countries of origin, and therefore on the one side it's really necessary to have this kind of cooperation with the countries of origin. On the other side, there is of course a gap sometimes in our understanding, and that's in practice it's a problem for us.
And we will come to all these obstacles in the second round. So thank you for that. Richard Barrett, if counterterrorism cooperation has improved so much, where does the UN come in here?
Well, I think the UN plays an essential role in this. I mean, you asked, your question was, is international cooperation working? We can certainly say it's happening. You know, whether or not it's working, it may be a different issue. But certainly, if you look at the United Nations, then most markedly in September 2006, when the UN adopted unanimously the global strategy to counterterrorism, all 192 member states supporting that, which is a remarkable feat for the General Assembly. Clearly, there is a great desire among all states to cooperate on terrorism, because I understand it is a global problem. But of course, many states, as has been said earlier, for many states it's much less of a problem than for others. And for example, so far as international terrorism is concerned, you can rule out most of South America, you can rule out most of Africa, certainly sub-Saharan Africa, and you can rule out many countries in the Far East. So it doesn't necessarily include all countries, but that still leaves very many. And among those countries, there's been considerable action. What the impact is will be, probably play out further along the line, because I think that there's a maturity of understanding, there's a growing sophistication of approach. And as counterterrorism moves from the directly kinetic, if you like, the catching and killing, to more trying to deal with the reasons why people become radicalized to the point of violence, I think that the international community will inevitably work closer together, because although many of those reasons are specific to particular countries, cultures, and so on, a lot of them are not. And I think most countries that I've come across in the sort of front line of this fight against terrorism really do look to learn from the experience of others and to help others to build their experience.
Ambassador Patterson, what would you say are the sort of main obstacles that you have encountered in fostering that cooperation? Is it political will? Is that a major obstacle?
I think the political will issue has fallen away over time, but I think there are sensitivities still, particularly when I think we've all agreed that 9 years after 9/11 it's less about capture and kill and dealing with the long term, much more about dealing with the problems of violent extremism, of countering radicalisation. Well, for external partners to get involved in that often creates domestic sensitivities. It can be intrusive. And often we find the best way to work is not government to government, but government to NGO. But again, that needs at least the tacit approval of the host government. But some of our best partners are NGOs in countries such as in the Mindanao area of the southern Philippines, in Indonesia, in southern Thailand, and now also we're working in both Bangladesh and Pakistan with NGOs who know the local landscape, are much more across the problems, but often need seed money, and they come to us with project proposals. We examine these, and if we judge that that they're likely to be an effective deliverer and that the proposal is sound, then often we'll provide the seed money. But in many cases, it's very important that we not seek credit for this, that this be done in essence under the radar screen, that the NGO itself gets the credit for this. To be blunt about it, if the hand of Western governments is evident, it's often the kiss of death.
Mm. How would you respond to Dr. Hanning's concern about issues such as human rights, for example? Now that countries have to cooperate with, states like Pakistan, Indonesia, perhaps other countries that are often cited for human rights abuses, how do you bridge that gap? How can you work with their services effectively without involving yourself in practices that would be illegal under your country's constitution?
I think the way to do this, a good example of this would be programs we're now developing with Indonesia for working within Indonesian prisons, where you might think there could be questions raised about human rights practices in the past. Certainly they would have been in the past, I think less so now. The best way, I think, is to pitch in and work with the local authorities to educate them about international human rights standards. What we found when we went into Indonesian prisons, the objective of the exercise was to improve management of terrorist prisoners, improve practices related to that. But we found the problems were much wider. The prisons were vastly overcrowded. The database of prisoners was non-existent in many cases and certainly not computerized. So we worked with the Asia Foundation in Indonesia to develop a computerized database of the prison population. That's not yet complete, but a first stage has been completed. And we now have corrections officers working within the prisons. But they, of course, have found the problems go way beyond management of terrorist prisoners to management of prisoners more broadly. Well, we believe there that that's where counterterrorism crosses over in some ways into development assistance or improving governance. And that's fine by us. If it meets both objectives, then I think we're getting better value for the money we've invested.
Eric, how does the US government get around the human rights issue?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to underscore that irrespective of counterterrorism considerations, getting more countries to live up to their international human rights standards is an objective in and of itself. And in particular, in the context of countering terrorism, we know that the failure to respect human rights is often a driver for, at the local level for political violence. And just getting back to what Ambassador Patterson said, I mean, certainly in our approach to capacity building around the world, we are constantly emphasizing human rights issues and rule of law issues in the training. They're integral parts of that training. We won't train officials who have poor human rights records, human rights violators. We won't train them, and we monitor the training and the equipment we deliver to ensure that it's not being used against the wrong people.